Patricia Kelly, thank you so much for taking your time to doing this. I really appreciate it. I know it is a busy time right now, and I don't even know, are we in the same time zone? Are you at your home? Are you traveling right now?
We're in the same time zone. I'm in Los Angeles. I just got back from a fantastic trip to London, seeing all of my young dance friends. I saw Matthew Bourne's 30th anniversary of Swan Lake twice. I got to see two different casts, and it is brilliant. It holds up in a way. I think it's even more relevant now than it was 30 years ago when it was so revolutionary. And I would kind of go see my choreographer friends at an event, and they'd say, "Oh, I have this opening and I have this opening." So it was just, I bounced from one friend's work to another. So it was really fulfilling. I love these young dancers. They're so committed and they're so just dedicated to the work, and they're beautiful to watch. So I feel very privileged to have them as my young friends.
So let me ask you a question. Were you a dance fan before you meet your late husband, Gene Kelly, or all of this happened afterwards?
No, I have to admit, it really came after. I really had the education with Gene, as I've called it a college of one, which is what Scott Fitzgerald's wife, lover, Sheila Graham, wrote a book called College of One. And I felt like that was really what I had with Gene, not only in dance, but in American popular song, in why Frank Sinatra's voice was so exceptional. But he really introduced me to the history of dance, the various styles of dance, and I just did not have that before. So it was kind of this wonderful education every night. It was just, we'd watch movies. I forced him to watch his own movies, which he didn't love to do, but we would also watch other movies like John Ford's Stagecoach, and he would describe how the camera worked and everything. So it was film 101, dance 101, music 101, and every night.
So you had nothing to do with dancing. As a matter of fact, when you met Gene, you never heard of him, which is really bizarre, not to hear of one of the most prominent and biggest movie stars in American history, pretty much 40s and 50s. It was Fred Astaire and Gene Kelly. So you have never heard of Gene Kelly. And my question is, if for a person like you who has never heard of Gene Kelly today, how would you describe who he is, what he has done, who was Gene Kelly?
Well, it's interesting. I did not know who Gene was when I met him, which is remarkable. I did not know what Singing in the Rain was, but I was a very nerdy Herman Melville scholar, and I really spent all of my time in a library with my nose in a book and thought that was going to be my future. I envisioned that I would be teaching at a university, and so when I was writing a television special about the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C., and that's when they said that someone named Gene Kelly was going to be the host narrator, and they were all talking about Singing in the Rain, and I just went along with it. I didn't want to show my ignorance, but I honestly did not know if it was a man or a woman. And when I met Gene, the director decided he would put me in the room with Gene to keep all of the other women away from him, because they were all trying to get a marriage proposal out of him. And my pet studies in graduate school it was our word origins, it was etymology and poetry, and those just happened to be Gene's pet studies as well. So when we got tossed in this room together, we started playing word games and quoting poetry back and forth, and by the middle of the week, I was completely enchanted. He spoke French, he spoke Italian, he spoke Yiddish, he read Latin, he wrote poetry. He had absorbed so much, literature, art, history, very often read a book a day. He was an economics major, and And I think, I didn't know. He even through this entire week, I never knew he was the one of the most famous men in the world. And I think in a way that was the way to get to know him, because so many people come to him with this kind of knowledge. They think that they know what he's like because they see him up on the screen and they imagine that's what he's like at home, that he sort of dances around the kitchen and things like that. And he was a very cerebral guy. I mean, he would prefer to be home in front of the fire reading a book than to be out at a big Hollywood party. He wasn't part of the Hollywood scene. That wasn't what he relished. It was being home and listening to music. As I said, Frank Sinatra, Judy Garland, Nat King Cole Trio. And I think people always ask me, what word comes to your mind when you think of Gene? And the first word that always comes to my mind is decent, and integrity. And I think those surprise people. I think people will think I'll think dance or athleticism or masculinity or gracefulness. But I really think of him as the man that he was, which was a man who he looked out for the other guy. He looked out for the underdog. He really, I think, growing up in the Depression in Pittsburgh, he knew what it was like to be the bottom of the barrel, kind of as an Irish Catholic and as a lower middle class kid who was rejected by a lot of the upper middle class and upper class kids. He felt a division. He was kind of an outcast. And so he really looked out for those people who had less than and everything. And so he was so romantic. He was I'll have people say, was Gene romantic? And he's the epitome of romance. This is a guy who used to wake me up in the middle of the night just to go out onto the balcony to see the full moon. And he would leave little valentines for me all around the house on Valentine's Day, these funny little things that he made, and leave little notes that always made me smile or laugh. He'd stick them on the refrigerator. So he was just a guy, but he happened to be a genius. And what he really wanted to be known for was for being behind the camera, not in front. He didn't really care about performing, but he wanted to be known for changing the look of dance on film and for creating a new American style of dance. So I think those would be things. And whenever I mention any of what I just said to you, people are surprised because they don't attach much of that to Gene at all. They always say, in fact, all the London cab drivers, they'd say, well, I never knew any of that about Gene. They know him and they love him, but they never knew the many, many dimensions to him.
From all you said, there's so much I didn't know about Gene. And obviously he was this huge movie star that made so many incredible movies, including American in Paris and Singing in the Rain, which are considered one of the best musicals ever made. But you mentioned that he was a romantic. Now, may I ask you, how did Gene propose? Because I believe that the way the proposal tells a lot about the couple. And
that's interesting. The way Gene proposed is it's so Gene that it was so spot on and not what people expect, which I think is kind of interesting. To me, it fits him exactly, but other people are surprised by it. I'd been living with him for over 5 years, and we worked together every day as I recorded him in some fashion every day for over 10 years. And so we were sitting in the bar of our house and at the table there, and he just looked at me and said, you're around, I guess I should marry you. And that stuns people. They think would have been such a big fanfare, but not for Gene. That was really classic Gene. So I had to kind of laugh at it because it's so fitting and to not make a big deal out of it. But then when the day we got married, he said, this is so much fun. I wish I'd done it before. And I just kind of laughed at that. So it was just classic Gene, pretty straightforward.
Straightforward and practical, and yet spontaneous.
Yeah, exactly. It was, and funny. Kind of makes me laugh now. It's like, so just, and then he left a note for me that I found pretty recently, the day we got married. I'd forgotten about it, and I found it in a box, and it just says, "This is it. You're stuck. Love, love, love your new husband." And so that's that again. That's just classic Gene.
Well, Patricia, everyone comments about the age gap. There's a 47-year age gap between you, between you and Gene. And when you met Gene, you were in your prime, I would say, time as a woman. I think you were 31 years old. Correct me if I'm wrong. Now, have you ever thought about having family with Gene? And it's not impossible. I mean, Al Pacino just had a baby. He's 82 years old.
I was 26 when I met Gene. I was
26. I'm sorry, 31 when you got married.
When we got married. And the age difference, I never even noticed, honestly. I just, it wasn't until I started seeing myself on every cover of the tabloids at the grocery checkout that I began to started to count up the difference. I never counted up the difference in the age because Gene was so vibrant, so young at heart. And so there was no sense of old in him ever. I mean, he was always he said he always had this kind of childlike view of the world. And I think that's what was so apparent in the movies and in the way he approached life. So it would have been very nice if we could have had children, but we could not. So that was something that wasn't an option for us. And so I always say now that I don't have children of my own, but I have thousands of them around the world, and I don't have the responsibility for them, but I get to go and see them on stage, and I get to go to lunch with them and talk about their aspirations. And so I feel very privileged in what I have, and I get to be surrounded by all of these young people in theater and dance, and I think that's really nice for me now.
And I think you're so right. There are so many people that have been inspired by Gene's legacy. He was such an incredible, not only dancer, but as you mentioned, choreographer and director, and just a man and a true man of art. So Gene played a huge role, as you actually mentioned, in a public perception of a male dancer. So he was very masculine, very athletic, energetic. There was a lot of gymnastic elements in what he did. And I think he changed that perception of a dancer for a lot of men. Now, I have a 10-year-old son he's athletic, but also artistic. He likes to perform. But at a certain point, he said, "Mom, I don't want to take dance classes because basically on every 100 girls in a dance class, there would be maybe 2 boys.
Yep.
And it's just not cool. And all his friends play soccer and football and baseball and other sports. And he's afraid that they would call him sissy." I know that you are involved in kind of a work that would, I don't know if this is an organization, but what do you think Gene would tell to a young boy who would like to dance but has these concerns? And what kind of work have you done or Gene done to bring dance more approachable to boys?
Well, it was really Gene's crusade, and that was the word that he used, in fact, to make it okay for men to dance, which is he created an omnibus television special in 1958 called Dancing a Man's Game. And he brought in all of the top athletes of the time. So Mickey Mantle is baseball, and Johnny Unitas football, and Vic Seixas, And what he did was he had each of them demonstrate something that was a classic move for them as a baseball player, football, soccer, ice skater. And then he took each of those their movements and he combined them and choreographed a dance that he performed using all of the same movement, just to show that they're all interconnected. What the baseball player is doing is what Gene is doing, because the style of dance that Gene created, when he looked around and he said, how does the American male move? There was no model for it. There was the European model of ballroom dancing on polished floors, but no model for what Gene wanted to do, to dance to American popular song, but as a guy on the street, the guy he would know. And so he looked to what he loved, which was sports, and it was baseball and hockey, and you can see that in his movement, in these very broad, wide open steps, and very low to the ground, very different from the classical mode of being up on point. And he was classically trained, and so he could incorporate any type of movement. He was a trained gymnast, he was a trained acrobat, he could walk a tightrope. So all of these things he could bring into the dance he created. But he really tried to dispel this horrible stigma that it's not okay for boys to dance, and because he'd been beaten up and bullied as a young boy. And you would think that from 1958, now here we are in 2024, you would think we'd have gotten over this ridiculous stigma. But as you said, it's still very rampant. And I got an email today, a notice from a mother, a friend of mine in Italy, whose little boy, Olmo, fell in love with Gene during lockdown, watching American in Paris at 1.5, and then just started watching every movie. And then he'd get the costume for Three Musketeers and everything. Then he got tap shoes, and then he wanted to take ballet, but he was the only boy in the class. And he felt really self-conscious because he's surrounded by all these girls in tutus. And she just sent me a note today saying that Olmo had inspired more boys to join the class. And so she sent me a video of him with more boys, but still it's overwhelmingly girls. And so what I have been doing with some organizations in the UK, including one called the Phoenix Boys, is to work with organizations that understand it's important for boys to be dancing with boys, so that they can gain the confidence. They're not teased. So the older boys support the younger ones, and it's terrific. And there are a couple organizations like that in the UK. And so I'm just trying to spread that further, because I really think it's important. I think obviously, the girls dancing, that's great, but I think what really, as you're pointing out, is missing is the advantage for the boys and for them to feel safe. A lot of the boys that are in the organizations I know have been bullied. They've had their jaws broken because of dancing. And I think my hat is really off to this Simon Hundley, who has Phoenix Boys, because he understands that it's important for the boys to be with boys at a certain stage. Obviously, they can bring girls in. Obviously, they can bring girls in at a later date, and if they're doing certain performances, but it's really important at a certain stage that they're surrounded by boys. And I think your son, if that were an opportunity, he would love it. And Gene used to, when he was teaching kids to dance in Pittsburgh, what he would do to get the boys in is he said, "I'll teach you basketball if you come in and take my dance class." And so I think you have to work on it. But I decided that would be, I would kind of take that crusade on and try to spread that and make it so that it's okay for boys to dance. I don't know when we're going to crack this. It seems it's like such an obvious thing. Gene showed the connection between fencing and classical ballet, that the steps are the same. And this notion that it's not okay for men to dance is that men originated in dance. Women came to it very late. I mean, in the French courts, it was all men dancing. So I think we need to educate people about the history of this and the history of the movement, and find new ways to bring men, boys in. And I want to work with Matthew Bourne's company, New Adventures, in London, because they have programs to try to inspire young men, and I think that's another good entry. So I'm open to it. If anybody wants to kind of get on board with this, then I'd love to join forces, because I think it's really time to stop this now.
Right, we need such organization in United States, and
Exactly.
as you mentioned, Gene did a lot of sports. He was very athletic, and that's what I try to tell my son. My son plays soccer, and I truly believe that dancing helps in so many other disciplines. And as a matter of fact, Gene Kelly was such an amazing dancer, and I think such a unique dancer, because he was so athletic, and because all these disciplines complement each other. Now, I just wish that some of the boys, a lot of the boys, even if they start, they quit quite early. And I just feel if they stick around until the age of maybe 13, 14, when they start getting interested in girls, that would be it. Because I laughed when I read that Gene Kelly didn't want to take dance classes for the same reason, because the kids teased him and his mother forced him to do it, up until he realized that dancing is an amazing way to meet amazing, beautiful women, that women love men who can dance. And this is for exactly the reason why my husband danced. My husband used to be a dancer, and he told me the same thing. He said, I played soccer, I preferred soccer, but the minute I realized that I can meet all these girls in the dance class, and it's like I'm 1 to 10, I'm sticking around for sure.
Oh, that's funny. Well, yes, you're absolutely right. That was Gene said when he got to high school, he realized that girls like a boy who can dance. So he went back to dance class. But he encouraged a lot of the professional athletes to take ballet, a lot of the football players, really famous players. And they did. And they all said that it helped help them because of the grace, the movement, and the dedication, the study. So Lynn Swan took ballet, and Willie Galt, and all these people, and thank Gene for that. So I think it's really important. We just have to change the message, I think. And as you say, just bring it into the US more. The UK seems to be far ahead of us in it, and we need to have organizations like that here. But it requires a lot. I mean, this guy Simon is very dedicated. It's very time consuming to get all these boys together. He brings them together from all across the UK, from Scotland, London, Manchester, and they come together. So it's not only his commitment, but the commitment of these boys to drive hours to join the other boys. But you can see it. I mean, they got into the semifinals of Britain's Got Talent, and of course they lost to a singer. But I really thought that they deserved it because of what is required for dancing. I think people somehow think it's easy, and it's not. It's a very difficult sport. Gene said it's a masochistic sport. You often dance hurt. I was just with a good friend, a young dancer in London, whose knee popped out in the middle of a performance. So he's out for a couple months. And so you have to be really dedicated to your craft. And as you say, the athleticism, it's the same thing as if you're running in football, the same chance of getting hurt. And so we've got to figure out a way. I think we can do it, but it's going to require a concerted effort.
All right. Well, we need to put our minds together, because this is something I have personal interest in. And I do teach dance classes, and I do try to get as many boys involved as possible. I think Dancing with the Stars have been doing fair share of day work with having all the athletes on a show. And I danced with some football players. I danced with heavyweight champion. And interestingly enough, Evander Holyfield, it was the boxer that I danced with. He did take ballet classes as well.
Yep.
And it was very interesting when he said it helped him with footwork. Boxers have to be light on their feet. The footwork is such an essential part of so many sports. And I feel like coordination, just overall coordination. All right,
so they often win. That's the thing, is that the athletes often win Dancing with the Stars. So that's
they do.
So I think that shows. But again, shouldn't that be, if you've got Evander Holyfield, doesn't that send a message? But it doesn't seem to stick. It doesn't seem to stick. So there's a great fellow named Mickey Hunter up in the Pacific Northwest, and he's bringing boys in whose parents who are working lumber mechanics, things like that, but he brings the fathers in to work on the productions, and the mothers are obviously helping too, but he gets the fathers involved, and so that has helped. And he at one point had about 50 boys in the group, and so that may be it too, that you have to make sure that that the parents believe that it's okay and are supporting the child. Because if you get somebody who's saying, nah, that's for sissies, as you said, then that doesn't work.
Right. Well, I think there's a lot of work to do, and I have no idea why the Dancing with the Stars effort and seeing all these athletes doing so well in dancing has not translated, because I still see majority of girls in the dance classes, and it is concerning. So Gene, as we mentioned, was very masculine, very athletic, miles away from the style that was dominant before he appeared on the movie scene. It was the white tie, top hat and tails, Fred Astaire, and kind of a lot of feminine dancers in the movies. Was there any rivalry between Fred Astaire and Gene Kelly?
None whatsoever. And you're absolutely right that was what Gene came to, was this, as he said, a very European style. It was European dancing, the ballroom dancing, white tie and tails, polished floors. And since he grew up as I said, in Pittsburgh in the Depression, he wanted to dance like the common man, not like the rich. He didn't want
rolled up sleeves.
Exactly.
Right?
and not, white tie and tail wasn't who he was. And so he wanted to create a dance style that reflected his life. And I think that, but there was no rivalry. And the interesting thing is, people assume that Fred Astaire, who came before Gene, influenced Gene, but it's actually the other way around, because Gene never saw Fred Astaire before he created his own style of dance. He had carved it out in Pittsburgh very early on. And so when he finally saw Fred Astaire, Gene had already established his American style. And it was when Gene was in Easter Parade with Judy Garland, was to star in Easter Parade, and he had choreographed most of the movie, and he was playing volleyball on his volleyball court in the backyard, and he and his friend went up for the ball, and his friend came down on Gene's ankle and just snapped it. And that took Gene out of Easter Parade. There was no way that the ankle would heal in time for him to complete the movie. So he suggested to the studio heads that Fred Astaire come in and take his place. Astaire had gone into retirement, and so this brought Fred Astaire out of retirement. And Gene said that Fred called him to say, "Are you sure you're okay? You want me to come in?" And I mean, they were very gracious. These are very gracious gentlemen, and had high regard for each other, mutual regard and admiration. And so Fred came in and replaced Gene. And what you see in Easter Parade then is Fred Astaire dancing to Gene Kelly's choreography. Very much of the movie is that. And then you see, after that, you see Astaire's style change and morph and into more of a Kelly style. So you see him go on to do things like Bandwagon. And so the
Mhm.
influence is absolutely the opposite. And I have a I know how Gene felt about Fred, which was, as I said, just mutual admiration. And I found a letter in the archives from Fred to Gene expressing that same thing. And so that confirmed there was no rivalry. And often Gene said Fred would drive to his house after Fred's wife died, first wife died. He would come to Gene's house, pick him up, and Fred had a Rolls Royce, and he'd pick Gene up, and they'd go to dinner together. And so yeah, it very different styles, very different people. Gene was a left-wing liberal Democrat. Fred was more of a right-wing Republican and hung out more with the elite, the very wealthy horse people, the Vanderbilts and things. And Gene was kind of excluded from that world, and so they didn't share. Fred played golf. Gene didn't like golf. Fred was a great pool shark. Gene was not a pool shark. You know, it's just very interesting to see the differences between. And Fred grew up in a trunk. He did not have the education that Gene had. Gene had gone to graduated as an economics major and went on to law school and eventually dropped that, but he was more the Renaissance man with the multiple languages and things. But Fred grew up with his sister as a child performer on the road.
I think when you grow up like this, the glamour of the Hollywood is more appealing. Maybe that could explain that. But it's amazing to hear that these two incredible dancers had mutual admiration and were friends. Now, Gene was described by some as a difficult person to work with, and his reputation being a bit of a cruel taskmaster and by his co-worker. And particularly his relationship with Debbie Reynolds was a bit strained during filming. I know she was grateful later on for the opportunity that she got. She said she learned a lot from the film. Now, I believe that extraordinary people like Gene, sort of geniuses, and I believe that Kelly was one of them, might be difficult to deal with because most people don't understand their creative process. Can you talk about that? Was Gene difficult to work with?
Yes, I think in the sense you really have to consider the source of those comments, and Debbie Reynolds, as I've said to people, you really have to. Her stories changed so often and went from highest praise and then just around. So I have to discount her because I don't think she was not a trained dancer, and she had to learn how to dance. She was primarily trained by Gene's assistants Carol Haney and Jeannie Coyne, and so I think it's kind of unforgivable, her description, and I'm afraid it is something I have to kind of keep stamping out because you really have to consider the source. And if you look at Gene's other coworkers and their comments, look at Leslie Caron, who understood dance and understood choreography and what the precision that was required. And same with Sid Charisse, and there also this misconception you'll hear from Sid, her husband saying if he could always tell if she had danced with Fred Astaire or with Gene, if she came home with bruises, it was with Gene, which I think again signals this sense of some kind of brutality or something. And I think we just really have to stop this sense because obviously the dancing that Gene is doing with Sid Charisse is far more athletic. And as you know, as a dancer, you can get bruised.
Oh gosh, absolutely. I got dropped on my head. I got elbowed. I got elbowed in my eye. I had to stop a performance because of that. I had to walk out of the dance floor because I got elbowed. So of
Yeah,
course it
so
gets very physical.
it's a very different thing, and so I think again those things are kind of held out, and they become, he's difficult, he's a taskmaster, he bruises people, and I think those are really dangerous things to attach to him, because I have so much mail from dancers with whom he worked about the generosity that he extended, the kindness, the appreciation for what they were doing. One of them is a good friend, is George Shakiris, who was obviously the star in West Side Story. And he's in Brigadoon, and he's doing the sword dance in Brigadoon. And he said that the men had shin splints. They were getting shin splints so badly in that performance, and that Gene came around and said, please, take a break, and far from this notion. So I really think it's kind of like, it's the stigma of the male dancer as well. I think we have to stamp out this notion of difficult. And what's difficult, I think, is Gene was changing the whole look of dance on film, and changing how the camera is used, changing the type of movement. And sure, there are people who were, some of the technicians who were resistant. They were used to doing it a certain way, but then and they would often say, it can't be done. You can't move the camera that way. And then Gene knew they could, so he would press for it. And then then these are revolutionary changes. So I think that's the way we have to look at it, and dispel and dismiss this kind of somebody whose story changes so often and is patently not true and doesn't fit the production records that I spent months going over. I mean, it shows who did what, when, where, and so I have to shut that down. And then I think also there's this thing that has started kind of in coordination with this, is this thing like people say, oh, he was such a perfectionist. Well, when did perfectionism become a derogatory thing? And for a dancer, I mean, Gene said, I don't understand a professional who isn't. I mean, when you go to the surgeon, do you ask for the sloppy guy? I mean, and as a dancer, if you don't hit your mark and the camera doesn't hit its mark, you have to stop and you have to do it again. And that wastes time and that wastes money. And those are two things that were absolutely verboten to Gene. So I think we need to kind of we need to use words differently, and we need to look at what's required. What was required for Singing in the Rain to make it a movie that we are still watching 72 years later? What type of perfectionism and hitting of marks and dedication and determination was required? I mean, I think any filmmaker, any cinematographer, any dancer, any choreographer understands what's required. So I won't. I used to be quiet about it. I'm not quiet about it anymore, because I won't let that go with Gene's legacy. He was not a mean man. He was not a cruel man. He was a man who wanted to basically change the world, change the way things were done, and he did. He revolutionized.
And he did. He did. And my next question was about Singing in the Rain, and you answered it. I wanted to ask what it takes to make a movie like that, because I know it was filmed over 5 years. Some of the scenes were filmed 40 times. People don't understand that back then there was no editing. So some of the scenes have to be filmed in one take. You mess up one step and you need to go again. And then the famous Singing in the Rain scene that Gene filmed when he had fever, and he apparently never even complained once about it. So thank you for answering that question. I think it's very true that revolutionaries are resisted by majority of people. People are afraid of change. Look at the fate of Galileo, Copernicus, who completely changed the way we look at the world, what was resisted through majority of his life and was called a heretic.
I'm going to cut you. I'm going to cut you off because Sing in the Rain. It wasn't 5 years. It was
Oh,
shot in
wasn't.
1951, and during most of the um, no, they were working so fast. I mean, Gene is still working on American in Paris, and he's starting Singing in the Rain. So these things move through. So it was shot during the summer of 1951, and the iconic Sing in the Rain scene was shot in 1.5 days. And yes, he did have a fever. And what you have to remember is he's directing, choreographing, and starring in it. So as Rita Moreno, who's Zelda in the movie, said, he was in constant motion. He's up on the boom, setting the camera
And he
angles.
was wet all the time, right? That's probably where
He
the fever
was, and
came.
he would go outside outside on the sidewalk and try to kind of bake the fever out of him. But nothing was done in one take. That's another kind of, there's so much mythology about it, but nothing was in one take. They were long takes, and I think that was what Gene insisted on.
That's what I mean. Obviously, it would be, we can't shoot a movie in one take, but those takes were so long that it made things a lot more difficult. Like if you look at the dance movie right now, it's cut from cut to cut. And even Dancing with the Stars, the way it's shot, uh, Dancing with the Stars went on a tour and they had celebrities come and perform. And I feel like a lot of people are very disappointed with the quality of dancing they saw. Not from the dancers. The dancers obviously are professionals, but from celebrities because they looked so great on TV. Why? Because you can have these amazing camera angles, you can change those shots. But here, suddenly, you see them in a one long stretch of time, straightforward, and it does not look that great.
That's interesting. And that was one of the things that both Fred Astaire and Gene despised, was anything. They both insisted on shooting the dance head on and full figure, and that you don't chop it up into body parts, and you don't put the camera on the ground and strange angles.
No gimmicks.
You distort the body. And I know I talked to a lot of the choreographers for Dancing with the Stars, because I naively thought they were choreographing the dance to be all chopped up, and they said, no, that's not what we do. But that's what because often the cinematographers, the camera operators, they don't understand dance. They think if you get these odd angles and you show just the head turning or the foot, I mean, this is the most impotent thing, just watching toe shoes. And what you realize is that when people will tell me, they'll say, well, people don't have any attention span, young people. You have to chop it up to make it interesting to them. And I'm like, I don't know what young people you're around, because I show Gene's films and kids are glued to it. They absolutely understand it. And I think people are yearning for that kind of choreography and that kind of cinematography and that kind of direction, that it's calm. You don't have to make it all hyper but you're right. If you have non-dancers,
it makes them look better.
That's the problem. And so instead of using real dancers in movies, they're using celebrities, and then they have to chop it up and put the real dancers in the background. And I'm hoping that some of these young people, talented young people, will look at what Gene was doing, not try to imitate it. Don't go back. It's not like rose-colored glasses to go back, but look at what he did and how effective it was and how effective it still is. And think about how the dance is shot, and respect the dance and the choreography, and respect the performances and trust the audience. Don't make everything so hyperkinetic, because I don't believe the audience is looking for that. With the shows that I do about Gene, my one-woman show and my big symphonic show, people are glued to the clips, and I think that signals that people are yearning for that.
Tell me about your one-woman show and the way you continue the legacy of Gene Kelly. What is this show like? How would you describe it to someone who would be interested to come and see it? Where can we see it?
Well, I often say it's like it's like a Disney ride that you're getting in a little boat with me and you don't know quite where you're headed and you don't know quite what to expect. And as you go along, I'm taking you into Gene's mind and into his heart. And then you come out and people at the end say, wow, I loved him before, but I love him even more now, because they understand kind of what I've been describing to you, which is the magnitude, the breadth of his brain, and really the depth of his heart, the man he was and everything. So, and I go into the end of his life, I go into his death, and I go into loss, how you begin to deal with the aftermath, of unpacking the boxes and beginning to find the notes again, and how it's so wonderful to have his handwriting in the note he leaves you the day you get married, but how it knocks you to the floor and you just, so there's such an emotional pack. It packs such a punch. And I'm so glad to have the archives. And yet it I have to almost take a deep breath when I go in, because it's so powerful emotionally. So people go on that ride and they go through that. And I think a lot of us, even like post-COVID, a lot of us have experienced loss and death in a way that we hadn't before. And so this kind of straightforward talk about it enables people to feel it, discuss it. And I greet people after the show. I think that's important. And show isn't really the right word. And I hope one day I can find how to describe it so people know, because they'll say, do you sing and dance? I'm like, no. I leave that all to Gene. He's up on the screen. And I just weave the stories in between that he shared with me. And then, so it's more of an experience. It's more like you're stepping in. I greet people as they arrive, and then I greet people after the show. And people line up. The show is 2 hours and 20 minutes long without an intermission. And people say it just goes by in a flash. And then they stand in the line for an hour and a half after, just to shake hands and to share what he meant to them, what he meant to their parents, their children, their friends. So it really begins the minute you come in the door and the minute you leave. And people go home and rewatch his movies. I give everybody my card, so they write to me, and it's just a very, very intimate, personal experience. I describe it as though you're really sitting in the living room with me, just having a chat. It's like, it's that personal, even if it's 1,000 people, or the symphonic show often 3,000 people or more. So, but I try to create it's an intimate conversational tone, more like what we're doing now than me lecturing.
Performing.
Performing. And it's largely extemporaneous, so I can move it around depending on where I am, and I listen to the audience. I can hear the tears, I can hear the laughter, and I can adjust it. So it's kind of a living, breathing thing, which I love. I would do it every night if I could.
Where can the audience find your show? Where do you perform?
Anywhere in the world. I will go anywhere. I don't have the one woman set right now. I've been off the road, and I'm just getting started booking again.
So it's a touring show.
It is. And it goes wherever. I've done it in Switzerland 3 times, Luxembourg, Sweden, London, various places across the US. So I'll take it anywhere. I basically say, if you build it, I will come. And I'm look forward now to kind of getting it back on the road. COVID hit pretty hard, and as you know, knocked the performances out, and the venues are slow to rebook. But I would do it anywhere. And people often write to me. They reach out to me and they'll say, I'm the director of a theater. Would you consider coming to Cincinnati? And I say, oh, absolutely. And so don't hesitate to reach out if you'd like to have. It's called Gene Kelly, The Legacy. And it's just there's nothing like it. That's the thing. And I think that's one of the things that's difficult in marketing it, because it isn't like anything else. It isn't like a show that has a set script where somebody comes out, and it isn't like a show where I sing and dance, and it isn't a show where I bring on other dancers. It's Gene, and you really you get inside his head, and you know what made him tick, and I think that's what distinguishes it.
So let me understand it correctly. In your show, you're using footage that has never been shown before, or what kind of what how would you convince someone who would like to see your show, who likes Gene Kelly, to see your show other than watch his movie or watch clips on YouTube? In terms of the footage that you are presenting, obviously your stories are very unique.
It's Gene on Gene. I mean, and that's what you don't get anywhere else. And you don't get, if you're reading things online, it's generally inaccurate. And this is really powerful because people look at the film differently. They're taken into it through his eyes, so they see it differently. And I think if you love Gene, it just adds multiple layers to that love. And if you've never been introduced to Gene, it's a perfect introduction. It's like a master class without it being, pounding in a class. And I have, speaking of boys, I have these young boys who started at age 5 coming. They've come at 5, 6, 7, 8, everywhere I've been in Southern California. They're like groupies, and I've kind of grown up. They've grown up with me, and they see it multiple times. So this is, when you talk about attention spans, for a 5-year-old to sit and watch a 2.5 hour
I can't quite imagine that. Yeah.
Your son would flip, and it might actually change the way that he perceives dance. It might convince him to go to dance class. And that's what happens. A lot of these boys come and they go, I want to do that. I want to do that. And they understand what Gene did to make it happen. And the symphonic show is called Gene Kelly, A Life in Music, and it does include a lot of footage from his television specials and things that people don't see, and kind of rare recordings. And I see a lot of live movies with live orchestras, and I've gone to several performances, and it's interesting, but in a way, I feel like I would look around and I would see that by the time you're halfway in, the audience has forgotten that they're real players on that stage, and they're just looking at the movie. And I try to make them hear the music differently and understand the connection that Gene had between the music and the dance and the movement of the camera. He had to synchronize all 3 of those things, and you understand that. But a lot of people don't. They just kind of think he gets up there and moves around, and they don't understand the mechanics of the synchronization. And so they look at it and they go, oh my gosh, now I get it. And then they can hear the music differently. They'll hear the trumpet solo. They'll hear different passages. And so they come away with a much richer understanding, not only of Gene, but of the movies and of the musicians and of the composers and the arrangers and what's really required to make these classics happen. So again, I love it. It's just, it's so much fun. And again, people come out and they say, I had no idea. I never knew that. I never knew any of that. So I think it's kind of it's sort of an eye opener. And I think it also is a heart opener. I get videos from a lot of people who end up jumping off lampposts and things on their way home. And I said in the, I just did the show with the Vancouver Symphony in British Columbia, and the end of the show is Singing in the Rain, and the iconic number. And I'd never said it before, but I said that Gene always said that the purpose of that number was to bring joy. And I said, I think we could all use a lot more of that these days. And the audience just erupted. And I think people are yearning for joy. They're yearning for something that is kind of it reintroduces our humanity, our sense of art and the value of art and the value of value of joy in our lives. So they all kind of dance out of the theater. It's really fun to watch. I love it.
Patricia, stage shows are amazing, and I live theater. It's my absolute love of my life, and this has been going on for as long as I can remember. I love performing on a stage. I love watching theater. I love watching shows, but there is nothing like bringing something closer to the audience and reaching out large numbers of people than the movie. Correct me again if I'm wrong, but I believe you were quite outspoken against a biopic about Gene Kelly. Biopic, obviously, it's a movie about someone's life, maybe with some, obviously, movies cannot depict reality perfectly. Everything is dramatized. It's adapted to a certain script. Why are you against it?
Well, Gene, I'm the trustee of Gene's name and voice and likeness, and I promised him that I would do what he wanted. I worked with him very closely, obviously, on all these things to understand how he wished his image to be used. And one of the things that he was virulently opposed to was a biopic. And part of that was we watched several, and they were people he knew, and he just saw people. There was just such a distortion of these friends and things, and he said, "I absolutely do not want a biopic," and I get it, because I mean, it's one thing, maybe you can do something about an actor or something, but I think a dancer, and Gene, people try to replicate Gene, and he always said, "Don't imitate me, don't do that. Take what I did and go beyond, make new art,
make it your own."
Exactly. And so somebody trying to be Gene, I think, it doesn't work. It doesn't help you understand his art. It doesn't help you understand Gene. And I think it's a complete distortion. So I am very vocal about it, because he was so insistent. And so
But he was,
yeah, I mean, he just didn't want it. And I don't think there are many good ones, frankly. I think they're I think generally they don't work very well.
My opinion is that you are right. They very often can distort the image of the person that they are about. However, very often they are an introduction or reintroduction to the audience about the person. Like, for example, my children, never heard about Freddie Mercury, or even they heard about Elvis Presley, but they didn't know much about him. And I don't know much about Elvis' life. I didn't grow up in United States. I missed the whole craziness era. And also, that was a while back too. That's not my time. But I watched the movie, and I was so intrigued by it that I wanted to go further. I didn't realize what an amazing dancer he was. I knew he was, a king of pop. He's called a king of pop, but I didn't realize that even Michael Jackson imitated some of his styles, including the White Sox.
Well, that's Gene. That was Gene, not
Gene.
That's Michael with Gene, not Michael. Absolutely memorized all of Gene's work and imitated his use of the hat and the White Sox and the moccasins and everything. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's right. And who knows? Maybe Elvis imitated Gene with White Sox too. I mean, I feel like all the incredible people, all the geniuses started somewhere, and it often starts with fascination with some of their predecessors. And I feel those biopics, although, as you said, maybe not quite right, they can really reach so much wider audiences than any stage show, that at the end of the day, there might be some value to it. But obviously, we have to respect the wish of a person that the biopic is about. So what I know there were plans in Hollywood about making a biopic with Chris Evans, I think, as a main character. Is this not going to happen because it is not lawful, or what is the story behind that?
I don't. Well, I mean, it's been floated for lots of different people, and I just kind of kept quiet about it because I just figure there was no script, there was no studio, there was nothing. So
Oh, okay. There's nothing solid. Okay.
I think those things, they die on the vine quite quickly, and I will just continue to be pretty vocal about it because I mean, it kind of gets back to what we were talking about before, the mythology about the making of these movies and the mythology of these people. And I spend so much of my time just stamping out the inaccuracies to try to make it so that by the time I kick the bucket, that Gene will be fine. Gene will go on forever. But I think that this misinformation, as much as we can get it out and away, because it just clouds, it just confuses people, it clouds things. And I think a biopic would absolutely do that. And I'd rather, you're absolutely right about, people say, well, why don't you film your shows and people could see more? And it's very difficult with the rights, as you know, with film and music, but also there's something that happens in that room. And as you know, with a live performance, it's a reciprocal experience. I'm listening to the audience, they're listening to me. We're exchanging something incredibly personal, and they get on the boat for that ride. And so I may not be able to reach the entire world, but I'll just keep doing that. And Gene, it was interesting because Gene obviously was a star in Hollywood, but he was a star in Broadway. And he said he much preferred being on the Broadway stage than being in front of the camera, because the camera to him was, he called it a one-eyed monster. It was so
very impersonal.
And yet when he was doing Pal Joey, he's there, and he said he could, like, the women coming in for the Wednesday matinees, he could just feel them bristle because he's a total rascal. He's sleeping with every woman on the stage and everything, and he could feel them just rear up and in opposition. And then he'd start to sing and dance, and he could pull them back in, and he could feel it. And so I think, I don't know, I think, and the opportunity to shake people's hand, the opportunity to engage, to connect with people now when we're so disconnected. I think that's a vital part of it, that physical contact, that somebody can say, I really loved your husband and he changed my life. And I don't know, I think that's priceless. So that's for now, that's what I'll stick with.
I must tell you that I was very fortunate to perform on a stage, and I think I was very fortunate that even the TV experience that I had included live audience, and that made a huge difference. Even if that audience was quite small, it maybe on TV it looks big. It was quite small. It doesn't matter. That live experience it's incredibly unique. And I have to ask you, there were talks or even rehearsals for a Broadway show called Singing in the Rain with a friend of mine and a co-star from
Derek.
The Stars, Derek Hough. It did not happen. Your thoughts on this project?
I don't know. I adore Derek. I mean, he's just such a good guy, and he's always been very respectful. And I love that when the young people who've been inspired by Gene they recognize it and they acknowledge it. And so I love Derek and Haley and everything they do. And I can only speculate. I don't know, so I really can't speak. But it was a Harvey Weinstein project, and I imagine that kind of collapsed when Harvey Weinstein collapsed. So
his prosecution.
Yeah, so I don't know, and I know that Derek has incorporated a lot of Gene's numbers in his
his
shows. So I've gone to a lot of those, and
do you approve?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, because he's not absolutely imitating, and I think that's what's exciting about Derek is that he's taking you know the essence is there. You know what the inspiration is, but Derek is going beyond, and I think that's what is really fun to watch. So I've seen several of those. He's invited me over to rehearsals and things, and I get to see that. And again, I feel really privileged. I mean, and I've seen the Dancing with the Stars. I've been in the audience for that many times, which, as you say, which is so funny
Oh,
because it's so, I just love everybody, and they're just so. I was there with Olivia Newton-John, and they're just so respectful and kind. And but it is funny. You think it's this huge amphitheater, little secrets of TV.
right. The camera angles can be incredible. Well, I think Derek is one of these people that are. He definitely was inspired by Gene. I know that personally, and I know that he adores his work, and we can see a lot of influences. And how about this? What if there was a movie that clearly stated that it's not a biopic by something that's inspired by his work, just like what Derek does? Would that be something that you would possibly be okay with, and you think Gene would be okay with?
Well, I think I mean, La La Land was definitely inspired by Gene. Damien Chazelle, uh, my friend, the director, came to the house, and he came with Emma Stone, and he came with Ryan Gosling and Mandy Moore, a choreographer and they went through the archives and looked at Gene's handwritten choreography for Singing in the Rain, and you can see so many bits and pieces of Singing in the Rain in it, and American in Paris, and their nods to many things, Jacques Demy, and so I think a lot of people may not have thought that was their favorite movie, but my hat was off to all of them because again, I think they were trying to do something different. They were trying to break new ground, create a musical, and not absolutely imitate, but definitely. I mean, Ryan jumping up on the lamppost, he said he was inspired by seeing Gene's note about that. And so that's the kind of thing, even now, Emilia Perez, you're seeing a musical that's very different, very dark use, but you've seen the choreography and the use of telling a story through movement and song instead of just dialogue. And then another movie I just saw was Flow, Flow, the
Mhm.
animated film, and the Latvian director. And it's like, I'm looking at it and I said, this is Gene. This is the use of movement to tell a story with no dialogue. And this is largely what Gene was doing with Invitation to the Dance, and the way that Gene really was at the forefront of live action and animation. And this director's taken it to virtual reality. But I wrote to him after, and he said I was deeply inspired by Gene, as were all of the people on Emilia Perez. So not only the cinematographer, the choreographer, but the songwriter. So Gene is just seeping into things, I think, in a very creative way. And so I think that's where we need to look, rather than looking at somebody pretending to be Gene, but just find new ways to tell stories, and use movement and song and things. And that's what Gene changed. He used the dance told the story, instead of, you didn't have the story go along and then you stop and do a number and then go along. It's the movement that tells the story.
Patricia, you mentioned that you took extensive notes during your time with Gene, and I getting prepared for this interview, I wanted to read your biography, Life is Too Short, The Legacy of Gene Kelly. I could not find
It
it
doesn't exist.
anywhere. It doesn't exist. I
No.
saw it somewhere on some website and I couldn't order it. So what is, will
No,
there be a biography? What's the story?
I've tried to remove that. That was a publisher that I ended the association with, but they had already put it up, and there's no way to remove it. It's very strange. So a lot of people think it's like a virtual book, but I not only have notes with Jean, handwritten notes, but I have the digital recordings, the tape recordings over the decade. And the first time I got back into those and started listening to them again was when I did an 8-part radio series for Radio France in 2022 for France Musique. And you can hear Gene sitting next to me on the couch as we're talking, and you can hear the ice in his vodka tonic as he's clinking it in his glass. And so it was powerful to hear his voice again and to hear us talking. And so I will be diving back into that again. I have to get everything digitized, and we'll probably use some of this new AI technology to clean up the tapes, because you now can refine the sound. A lot of them, I was recording him in cabs as we were driving around London, and you hear all of this noise. And I think a friend of mine can help me kind of make sure they're not only preserved, but you can hear the voice. And I decided to wait on the book. I wasn't ready. After he died, I realized I really wasn't ready to tell the story. I needed to get out and listen to people. And that's what the shows have helped me to do. It's to kind of confirm, what are people interested in? What's the story? I mean, I have 5 million stories I can tell. And it's helped me to kind of hone it, and as have the various social media sites. I'm on Instagram at Gene Kelly Legacy, and Facebook with Gene Kelly The Legacy. And initially, I was very distant. I would only post a picture of Gene and say what the date was, and because I thought, oh, people don't want to hear from me. They don't want my perspective. They just want Gene. And I learned over almost 30 years now, since Gene died, that people do want to know what it was like. They want the personal information. They want my voice. And so I was like a little animal crawling out of the cave, and I started to try things that were much more personal, and people responded. And I decided to make the book in my voice, and to use the quotes with Gene. And so I'm hoping I'm not on the road as much next year. So I want to finish the book next year and get it out. And I think it's time. I mean, it really is time. Beyond this, it gets to be a little bit tiresome and for people, but I'm not good, and I don't know if you are, but I'm not good at being on the road and writing something like this. I can make notes and things, but I think to do this, I almost need to put a chain around my ankle and put on my desk chair, go sit in the archives and just stay in the story, and not go fly off someplace, and not go to this dinner, and so I figure I need to clone myself. I need the person who can go to London.
At the same time.
Yeah, exactly. I need the one who just stays here and writes, and I need the one that goes off to London and gets to see Matthew Bourne's dancers and things. So I haven't quite figured this out, but my goal is to finish it next year. And then that way, that's the story that nobody has. And so that's that. And then I have other books. I have 2 books I want to do after that, which will be a book of photographs of Gene, with photographs by other artists, that like his friend Robert Capa, who introduced Gene to Switzerland, Eisenstadt's very beautiful photos of Gene, Jean Mélis's stroboscopic photographs. But I want the way that one artist looked at another. So I have Gene's quotes about those people, and I want those in really a beautiful resolution, a beautiful book. And then I have the objects, the objet from the collection, like Gene's Converse tennis shoes and things, and I want people to see those and hear his stories about some of those things. So And then the ballet that I recreated was Scottish ballet, Gene's ballet. That he was the first American-born choreographer to create a ballet for the Paris Opera in 1960. So he preceded Jerome Robbins, Bobby Fosse, all these people, but nobody thinks of Gene Kelly as a classical choreographer for the ballet. And I remounted that. It was the first show that Scottish Ballet opened with after COVID, and we're hoping to kind of tinker with that a little bit more and get that back on the road in 2026. So there are just so many things coming out, and the Because of Gene, the people being inspired by Gene, that project, and then the Boys Can Dance project. So maybe I need to make 5 clones. maybe I need to have 5 different ones going out.
Oh gosh, I very often feel the same way, I must say, and I'm very much looking forward to the book. I tried to read one of the biographies. I won't mention the author of Gene Kelly, and it was quite dreadful. I could not get. I'm
No.
so sorry. I could not go through it. There were some incredibly boring details. And it was just very hard to read.
They're
But
not
Patricia,
just one thing on that. I mean, that's the thing, is that I always say, people say, well, what book should I say? Don't read a book. Just write to me if you have a question, because the books are so inaccurate, and the stuff online is generally inaccurate. And the grand irony is that if people had done a good job writing a book about Gene, I wouldn't be here, because he brought me out because he was so angry about the misinformation that he wanted to tell the story himself. And so he hired me to write his stories. So so that's so funny, because I hate those books, but actually I'm here because of those books. But please do not even bother with them, because it'll confuse you. You'll go, oh, that's why he did it. But no, that's not why he did it. So just wait just a little bit, and mine will be out. And then I'll be out in, I hope, more podcasts and things like this, where people could come on and ask questions. And we'd have, even though I can't get to every location, we could create conversations and things. So.
Well, if I get any questions, I'll definitely pass it on to you. Now, Patricia, this question will be a little bit tough. You are a trustee of Gene Kelly's Voice and Likeness. And as you mentioned, you didn't know Gene before you met him, but you did spend last 10 years of his life taking extensive notes. What would you say to someone who doubts that you are the right person to be someone who continues his legacy and who is the trustee?
Well, there were a lot of doubters. I'd say, I used to get hate mail and things. There were bash sites for me, and people were a lot of people were extremely unkind, and I think just not, again, that kind of tabloid mentality of the Daily Mail and things, and it was very hurtful. I mean, I couldn't understand it. I couldn't understand why people were slinging all this stuff, because I had been, it was a different type of relationship, but it worked, and it was a very solid relationship. And so, but I just kind of hung in there. And I think that the shows have helped a lot, because I don't come out and say, oh, I love Gene and Gene loved me, but I think people coming out understand the relationship. They come out and they go, you know what, I get why it worked. I understand why this, even with the age difference, I get why it worked. And I don't have to explain that. And I think what's interesting is I've seen on social media, I've seen a lot of the people who were very antagonistic are now following me on Instagram and commenting very positively about my posts and things. So I think it's just, you have to be consistent. I just decided I was not going to crumble, as much as I was, very often just on the floor in tears at what people would say and write. I thought, I'm just going to stay true to what I know. and certainly rereading the notes and things affirmed what is true. And I think people have come along. I think people get it now. I think there's not the question anymore. It's not. People come on and they get it and they understand it, and they're very positive and very encouraging. So I think you just have to, if you have any question, just go on and watch the Instagram posts, and I think you'll begin to understand what our life was like and why I am the right person, and there is no better person to represent the legacy. He chose me. I didn't. He put me in that role, and he was a very smart man. He knew what he was doing. He knew I would. A friend of mine is Oscar Peterson's widow, the great jazz pianist and composer, and she uses the 3 P's. It's preserve, protect, and promote, and that's what we do. We preserve, protect, and promote. And Gene knew that. He was no dummy. He knew that to put me in the sole position was the right thing, and that I would do it basically to my dying day. It's what I believe in. So. And I feel privileged that he entrusted me with that.
Patricia, what is your relationship with Gene's family? I know that Gene was a family man and he loved his children very dearly. And in one of the documentaries I came across doing research for this interview as well, I heard his son saying that you pushed Gene away from his family in the last year of his life, and that he was very sad about it. Can you comment on that?
I can say it's absolutely not true, and I don't, I don't speak about Gene's children, and children is kind of an operative word. I mean, they're 82, 62. They're not kids, and so I think again, this is just terrific misinformation, and it's been a real. Gene dictated who came to the house and who saw him, who spoke to him. I didn't make those decisions at all. There's this assumption that I was this all-powerful person, but Gene was completely in charge of his faculties, and he made every decision about who visited him, who spent time with him, who the people he called. He was again, as I say, a very smart man, but also very he set the limits and the boundaries and things, and so that was not my role at all. And I think it's really I think it's kind of petty and cruel, but it's again, I just had to outlive the things. I think it's very hard to be the son of someone. How do you follow that act? I mean, and a lot of the sons of the great actors didn't make it, didn't survive. They killed themselves. I mean, it's a very, very, I think to be a child of a magnificent star is a very difficult thing. And you have to realize too, there are 3 different families essentially. And so, not that the 1 and 2 didn't all get along. So it's not just that I came along, but I'm kind of the, it's the poster child of the young woman who marries an older man. But we didn't fall into that. I mean, I had headlines of gold digger and all this stuff, but it's not true. And I didn't take from them or anything. Gene made every single decision, and that's all I can settle. And I think they can't. I don't think they want to accept that. It has to be somebody other than their father who made those decisions, but he made those.
I think it's you're right. It's difficult to have a famous parents. I don't know if Gene's children had aspirations to be in the show business, but it's definitely sad to hear. Now, Patricia, do you have any, like a personal anecdote or a story that would encapsulate Gene's personality?
I do, and it's actually one that I use in my show. So I'm giving away a little bit, but I'm going to share it because to me,
I appreciate that.
it does say a lot about who he was and why I have such tremendous respect for him. And it'll surprise you a little bit, I think. But Gene did a one-man show at the end of his life, and I was part of that. I would go on the road with him and see it. It was kind of fun to watch because he would come out and there would be these theaters, 3,000 seat theaters in Florida and things, and he created this same feeling that I've tried to create in mine, which is that everybody's just sitting with him in the living room, and that really was a great lesson to me of how to engage an audience. And so, but as we were leaving to go on one of these tours, we got dropped off at Los Angeles at LAX at the airport here, and the driver said, "Just go on into the airport lounge, the airline lounge." And we weren't members of anything like, as an example, this wasn't the lounge, Admiral's Club and that type of thing. We didn't belong to any of those. But we went into the lounge, and the woman at the counter said, "Are you members?" And we said, "Oh, no, we're not. We were just told to come in." And she said, "Oh, I'm sorry. This is for members only. You're going to have to go outside and sit with the rest of the civilians out there." And so she said, yeah. And so, but then she kind of realized that maybe she'd been a little bit harsh and in her voice, and so she said, "But let me just see your boarding pass, your ticket, and let me just see if your flight is on time." And so Gene handed her the ticket, and it says Mr. Gene Kelly, and she just went, "Oh my gosh, oh, Mr. Kelly, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. Absolutely, you can come in. I mean, oh, I didn't recognize you in your glasses. By all means, you're more than welcome to be here." And he just picked up the ticket and he said, "No, thank you. We'll go outside and sit with the rest of the civilians." Aww. And that's who he was.
He was the man of the people and the man true to himself.
Yep.
And a proud man at this. Patricia, what is the best advice that Gene have ever given you, both personally or professionally?
How to walk, how to stand for a photograph, how to walk, and how to walk in a gown, how to walk across a stage, how to climb stairs, how to come back downstairs. It was really My Fair Lady. But I really, I think of it all the time, and people always comment on it, how you can
the posture, the presence,
and you seem like you're a foot taller, and how you carry yourself, how you speak, how you acknowledge people, all of the things that people don't expect. But we used to watch the Academy Awards together, and he would say, "Look at this person crossing the stage." He said, "They're wearing $1 million worth of jewelry. They're in a gorgeous, thousands of dollar gown, and they can't walk. They don't know how to walk gracefully across the stage." And so I was glad to have walking lessons because I can go upstairs in a gown, and you can. I know you can, and I know you know how to walk across the stage and how to carry yourself in the presence of standing for photographs and things. And I talk to in a lot of schools, and the kids are all like, "Well, teach us how to walk. Teach us, we and the boys want to know how to walk and how to stand." And I think it's something that's kind of lost. Those lessons, people aren't getting those lessons anymore. They aren't being trained in the kind of how you carry yourself that would have been in the old days, and certainly with dancers and things. So that was, there were so many lessons, but that one every day I'm reminded. It's like he sits right here on my shoulder, and I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful because I feel like whenever I leave the house, I'm representing not one person, but two people. I represent myself, but I represent Gene. And so how I dress, how I carry myself, I dress for the opera openings, I put on a gown, and because I believe you're dressing for the performers. It's not about me. I'm not dressing for myself. I'm dressing to acknowledge and honor the people on the stage. And so I'm very aware that people are seeing two people at once. And so I have to, but I'm proud of that, but I just have to be mindful of it.
Patricia, very last question. So much of your identity right now is connected to Gene Kelly. And as you say, when you walk out of your house, you don't only represent yourself, but two people. But who really is Patricia Kelly?
I think it's interesting because I was saying this to somebody the other day that here I had envisioned a completely different avenue for myself into being an American literature university professor. But I had said to my dad, I said, at one point I said, I wish I could have a career where I combine film and music and dance and literature and public speaking. And
there you
go. Without thinking about it, I created my own career, the one that I really wanted and the way I feel most at home. I love being on the stage. I love being able to use the skills as a public speaker. I was an extemporaneous speaker in high school, and so I have no fear of going out at all. And I love being able to think on my feet and communicate with people. And so I have directed and created and written these two shows that tour. So I get to use my skills as a writer, as a creator, as a speaker, as someone who engages with people. So I feel like it's not, as much of me is in this as Gene. What people are seeing is as much my contribution as it's Gene's contribution. It's all very personal, but nobody else is going to be doing this stuff. Nobody else has the material to do this. And I think maybe not even the drive to do it. It took me 20 years to get Gene's ballet back on stage. You have to be really dedicated, and you have to know what it is and why and have the materials and know. I feel very confident because I have not only the material, I have his words. I have exactly what he said and how he feels about things. So I feel like everybody comes, I think when I do the shows, everybody comes away knowing as much about me as they know about Gene. I think they know who I am by the end of that. And I think at the end of this conversation, I think people will have a pretty good idea of who I am and what makes me laugh and what makes me think and ponder and what makes me sad and what I aspire to do. So and I'm doing exactly what I wanted to do, which in college, I said that in college to my dad. And who gets to do exactly what they want to do?
It does not happen often, that's for sure. Patricia, thank you so much for sharing your story, your experiences, for sharing your incredible knowledge of this extraordinary man that Gene Kelly was. Where can we find you on social media? I know you mentioned Gene Kelly Legacy's website and Facebook page, and any upcoming projects that you would like to share with the audience.
Yes, and people can message me on Instagram, and I do answer. So please do. I send, and if you don't hear back, then try again, because I really do respond personally to everything. I post everything personally. Somebody said, "Who writes your posts?" I'm like, "I do." And who answers? I'm like, "I do." There's no magical. What you see is what you get here. And people can sign up at genekelly.com, which is the website, which I'm waiting to remount when I'm getting all the pieces together. But you can at least sign up there, and then you'll have notices. And then the next symphonic show is with the Auckland Arts Festival on March 15th in Auckland, New Zealand. So that will be with the Auckland Symphony Orchestra, and I'm really looking forward to that. I've been to Australia, but not New Zealand. So that's the next symphonic show. but I will have a couple. I have several others in the works. In fact, one that might be getting pretty close to you. So as soon as I
Nice.
have the
Please
word
let me
about
know.
that, we'll get the word out, and maybe we can have another conversation. But they just will be popping up across the U.S. and abroad. So I do post it always on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn. I'm at Patricia. I think it's Patricia Ward Kelly at LinkedIn, and the Facebook is Jean Kelly The Legacy. And so I always post the minute I'm able to announce a show, then I put it on there and try to keep posting so people will know. And then but just write to me. I'm at also, you can send an email at patriciakelly@jeankelly.com. So anything, I'm pretty available. I mean, that's the thing is as I said, I always give out my cards that has all that, they have all that information on it. And I think I don't have a mobile phone, which people don't understand, but it's like I needed one layer of not of kind of privacy of because I give out my information so much and I do respond to everything, and it takes me about 2.5 hours every morning just to answer things, and but I think it's important to do that. If people take the time to write, I think it's important to take the time to write back. So, but it also eats into that book that has to be finished. So, you know, that's why those clones, I've got to get with a clone very quickly.
Patricia, thank you so much again, and thank you so much for your continuous work to promote and to continue the legacy of Jean Kelly.
Well, thank you for your time too, and for the work you're doing. And it'd be great. Maybe we can find a way to join forces and figure out getting
Boys can dance.
Boys can dance. So let's keep knocking on that door, and I'll keep you posted about what I'm doing. And I think we can get it to our neck of the woods. I think wouldn't California be a great place to initiate a lot of those things? So if you're up a little bit north and I'm in LA, so I think that's a crusade we could take on easily. And you certainly have a 10-year-old who I've got to get him to my show. I'll convince him. I'll turn him, I'm sure. All right. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you again.
I so appreciate it. And tell all the dancers hi for me too. I mean, I haven't seen Derek for a bit. I know he's out on tour again for the Christmas show, but if you see any of those folks, be sure to say hi because they've been very kind all along. So take care and let's stay in touch.
Let's stay in touch.
Okay. Bye-bye.